President Muhammadu Buhari earlier in the day received British Prime Minister Theresa May, who is on African soil for the first time since becoming Prime Minister in 2016. And indeed, we hear the first time ever. Theresa May's African tour, first South Africa, now Nigeria, and later Kenya, is part of a UK trade mission aimed at boosting post-Brexit fortunes and strengthening partnerships with British allies on the continent. Her meeting today with President Buhari centered on issues of security and deepening relations between Nigeria and the United Kingdom, following which several agreements on defense and economic development were signed. Well, it does appear that the UK, which is currently the second largest investor in Africa after the US, is aiming to become the top investor in Africa. And you're probably asking already, what will be Nigeria's pie in UK's trade relations on the continent? And what are the gains from Theresa May's visit? Well, that is our focus on Nigeria today, this Wednesday. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome. My name is Kande Daniel. Now we'll be getting expert opinion on the visit of British Prime Minister Theresa May to Nigeria, as I have with me in the studio Ambassador Bulus Lolo, retired permanent secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Ambassador Lolo, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Kande.
Now, diplomacy was quite fast-paced today, so to say, as the Nigerian and British leaders met behind closed doors, agreements were signed. Can we begin by taking a look at those two major agreements on security and economy? First, the economy.
Well, thank you very much once again for having me on the program. In your opening remarks, you prefaced it with the acknowledgement that what the British Prime Minister has set out to do is preparatory to the UK's exit from the EU. Mm-hmm. That's very apt because, as you do know, in 2016, the United Kingdom opted to leave the EU on its own terms. They have been in negotiation with the EU and are not having it quite easy. So what the UK needs to do is precisely what Theresa May has come to achieve in Africa, to find that leverage for the United Kingdom in a world that will become much more competitive than before. Hitherto, and before the exit from the EU, they benefited as a bloc. Wherever the European Union went, naturally the UK was part of that ensemble. But now that they are going to leave the EU, it means that they will be competing in cases against the European Union. So market is about what one will say the UK is seeking to achieve and consolidate. And naturally, Nigeria being their second largest market on the continent, you'll imagine that they will want to preserve their place in the Nigerian market. And of course, the choice of the three countries that Theresa May is visiting, South Africa, Nigeria, and Kenya, was no accident. It is a case of deliberate calculus to have and achieve optimal gains out of the relationship. So the economic agreement that we have signed, the quantum of it is not what we should look at, but what comes by way of benefit and opportunity. Because for us in Nigeria too, we are seeking to broaden our economic base and to diversify the economy. And through this diversification and broadening, we will need a market out there. So having the United Kingdom, much as it is a traditional ally of Nigeria, reassuring Nigeria that they are not turning their back, whether they're in the EU or not, is a welcome development, I would say. And that's a major thing that we should take away from. The second thing from the diplomatic point of view, of course, is imagine a situation where Theresa May were to come to Africa for the first time and skip in Nigeria. Most headlines tomorrow will read, UK snubs Nigeria. So the United Kingdom, of course, has recognized and reaffirmed that Nigeria is still very important and also very, very relevant in their calculation on the continent. So these two together.
Yeah, taking a cue from one of your lines a moment ago, seeing that Nigeria is also a very big, in fact, second largest economy in Africa. Would you envisage that the Nigeria-Britain relationship post-Brexit, on the basis of that, would be like symbiotic, you gain again, or are there any other things you think we should anticipate?
Gain again is always a given in diplomacy. It is, you gain
sometimes heavier on one side.
Well, sure, it depends on what you bring to the table. If you are comparative partners in terms of your capacity and capability, it's one thing. But where you aren't, as in the case of, if you look at what Nigeria gets from the UK, I want to believe that the trade balance is in the UK's advantage, because we export principally crude oil to the UK, but we import almost every other thing imaginable from the UK. So we don't have that capacity that the UK has. But to aim to have a win-win interaction is what we should aim to achieve. And yes, whether or not the UK remains in the EU, they are living in 2019, we know. But the historic relationship between the two countries is what we should count on, that we have far-reaching interactions with the UK that transcend economy today, thereby making it incumbent on both Nigeria and the United Kingdom to seek to consolidate our relationship, whether the EU, whether the UK remains in the European Union or not. And number two, you will not have another country overnight take the place of Nigeria to the United Kingdom in Africa. No, we are already endowed by our size as the largest in terms of interactions with the UK. Number two, our economy today is the largest. And number three, the largest concentration of people of African origin in the United Kingdom are from Nigeria. So these three factors in and of themselves will impel an interaction between the two countries that transcend momentary changes in geopolitics.
Right. Still related to today's talks in Aso Rock Villa between Nigeria and the UK, should we be, that's talking about the second agreement now, should we be expecting further levels of assistance from Britain, specifically in the war against terrorism?
Well, of course it will seem that that is the very reason why the second agreement was signed. They've been providing assistance in different ways for us. And because they have, but in order to add to what they are doing, the second agreement was signed. That then will introduce new elements. I'm not in government. I'm not privy to the content of the agreements. Over time, one will get to know the specific areas. But at a glance, I do know that they have been providing, the UK since 2015 when this government came into office, has been cooperating with the government and has been providing training, especially in the northeast and with our armed forces. Figures I recall, number maybe over 30,000 personnel have been trained. But now that they have signed this new agreement, it will introduce most likely other areas of training that hitherto they were not providing. And that is to show too that the fight, the government's commitment to providing security in the country will benefit from this quality and type of training that the UK will bring. And I want to believe too that with all sides doing what they have to do, the results in time will show when we continue to have the upper hand over the insurgents in the northeast, continue to provide room for displaced persons to go back to their normal lives, and 3, put in place steps and measures that guarantee their safety as they go about their normal lives in that part of the country.
All right, Ambassador. We'll talk some more in a moment. You're watching Nigeria Today, focusing on the impacts and gains of British Prime Minister Theresa May's visit to Nigeria. We'll expand the discussion after this break.
You are watching NTA, Nigerian Television Authority. For more information and news updates, visit our website at www.nta.ng, or you can follow us on Twitter at NTA News Now, or you can like us on Facebook at NTA Network News. Stay connected on our YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/NTA News Online. Watch our live stream at www.nta.ng/live. NTA, you can't beat the rich.
The Nigerian Television Authority News 24 channel, your dependable all-round news station, offering you world-class news programs, documentaries, spotlights, promos, and information highlights. Take advantage of our network reach and advertise your interest, goods and services with us. NTA News 24, first equals with digital broadcasting. You can reach us on channel 21 terrestrial TV and channel 101 on the StarTimes platform. For more inquiries, please call Coretta 0803-618-9986 or Henry on 0803-379-0884. Join us today.
What is fake news? A false information with no verifiable source presented as true story on media platforms with the sole intention of causing injuries, chaos, and disaffection between persons, groups, or countries. Fake news facilitates extremism. Fake news creates panic and distrust. Fake news breeds hatred. Fake news kills. Don't joke with it. Don't be in a rush. Verify your sources and facts. It is better late than fake. This message is brought to you by NTA News 24.
The Nigerian Television.
Thanks for staying with us. Like I said earlier, we're expanding our chat. Ambassador Lola is still here, and we are now joined by Professor Judy Uwazurike, who is many things, but especially author and public affairs commentator. Well, Prof, we'll task you a bit now that you're here. We have talked a bit about the two agreements signed between Nigeria and the United Kingdom today. I think I should just directly ask you in reference to those two agreements. Do you think that these agreements, economic and defense, are pointers to achieving what we have heard that Theresa May planned to achieve, i.e. strengthening ties with allies in Africa. Do you think these two agreements will help Britain to achieve that with Nigeria?
Yeah, I think she knows what she's doing, for one thing.
We would like to know how, precisely.
Exactly. She knows what she's doing. She's very clearly bent on taking Britain on a new journey of historical proportions by becoming a world power again, a standalone world power in its own right that can stand with the big powers that really exist now, which would be US and China. Those are the two mighty powers we really have. And Africa is an area Britain and France have long-standing relationships, so it's not a surprise that she starts with those. And what Africa really needs today are mostly security arrangements that can work, as well as economic reinfusion and renaissance. In other words, how do we join the modern economy? It's through this sort of agreements, assuming they're fair enough and can be implemented, but they're good for Britain, because what Brexit is all about is about Britain returning to reckoning as a global power. So by traveling the world and striking deals of this nature, they are pushing their national interest. The issue is for us, what is our own national interest? I think that they speak to us. I think the agreement with regard to the military is a bit unprecedented in terms of what they intend to do, train entire units and battalions and so on. But if that can help us win this war, it's very much in the right direction. But very clearly, we need to begin to move into a middle-income, technological type of situation. At this point, our trade with Britain, as well as other powers, is mostly oil and a little bit of gas. And in the case of Britain, 37% is pharmaceuticals. That's not very good at all. So very clearly, we have to look at it. The devil is in the details. You know, it's a question of what is included and what are the terms of exchange and so on.
Well, Prof, you sound as if you just had a meeting with Ambassador before you joined us. Well, that's the good thing about talking with experts, I must admit. Well, do you think that related to the economic agreement, we could take anything away with regards to the fight against corruption? You know, it's a big thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was an aspect too of the economic agreement where they said the British government will assist Nigeria in asset recovery. And again, by way of just repeating what is already known, the quantum of Nigerian resources hidden in Britain through corrupt and illicit means is unimaginable. And if you have, at the highest level of the British administration, a firm commitment and desire to help Nigeria recover these assets, I think it would be a big boost to government's fight in that regard. And if anything will come by way of benefit to Nigerians, it will be the reinfusion of the recovered assets so that it will serve the very people that have been denied through corrupt and illicit transfer of funds and resources out of Nigeria. So yes, it's a good one for us to have the UK commit itself that it will be a partner in this regard, because in the past, when the environment was conducive for our assets to be taken out and hidden in the UK, we probably would not have gotten to this. But now that they are saying they will not provide the forum or the hiding place for such assets, I think those who still know that they will have nowhere to hide. And with such quantum of resources out in the open, it will be easy for our own agencies at home to track and prevent.
Now, Prof, before I forget to ask this question, I know you want to say something, but in addition to that, let us know, are you reading any statement from all of this interaction concerning the Buhari administration and Nigeria?
Well, very clearly, it's all in line with what the government is committed to, the anti-corruption fight, expansion of the economy, and so on and so forth. There is no big surprise there. I just think very clearly that when it comes to corruption, very clearly the agencies to track these things are already there. And the question we have to ask ourselves is whether we are working optimally. These agreements are very helpful. There's absolutely no question about that. But short of becoming obsessed with this, we also have to expand our economy. We also have to deal with the problem of poverty. For instance, Theresa May in South Africa, and you may have mentioned that, remarked on the Brookings Institution reports that Nigeria now harbors the greatest number of poor people on earth. Now, that's a problem, but I also am aware that the Vice President made a statement yesterday, thereabouts, about the amount of money that will be poured into the economy to create wealth. And I welcome that, because that's really what it's all about. Let the law enforcement people do their thing. Right. All these treaties are enabling. It's not the first time they've said these things before, but every British Prime Minister has said it and so on. But let's just say that if the agencies do their work on both sides of the Atlantic, this shouldn't be it should not be a national obsession. It's a law enforcement issue in many ways. Our issue, quite simply, is to increase our economy. India, for instance, is now the 6th largest economy in the world, and will become the 5th largest economy, overtaking Britain. Britain is currently the 5th largest economy. We need to have some African countries begin to move in with the big boys out there. That's really what's important. And to do that, you need cultural transformation. It's not just enough to talk of law or law enforcement. It's really attitude. It's really social scientific kind of issues that we need to be dealing with in many ways. And law enforcement is a very central part of that. But a lot needs to change in Nigeria. I remember there was something called war against the discipline at some point. That wasn't such a bad thing. I wish we could find a democratic way of infusing that into our constitution. You go to Britain or you go to America, you see how disciplined they are. People obey the laws. People stand in line. People do what they need to do. And the sort of internecine conflicts that we have here, they've tried to accommodate each other, as it were. So there are things that Nigeria can and should and needs to do to leap forward to economic empowerment. All
right, Prof. Time is quick running out on us, but shifting gear a little bit, is there any way in which this visit and the bilateral talks could impact the preparations we're making and the actual conduct of Nigeria's general elections next year?
Well, it's always very good when world leaders take out some time to pay a visit to Africa's leading country in more ways than one. Angela Merkel is on her way coming. The British Prime Minister has just come, and there will be many more. It's very good. In terms of the election, I think what it is the world is very concerned, and there's no question that everyone wishes Nigeria very well. I don't think it will have any other direct impact, maybe indirect positive feeling, but it's good. It's all good in more ways than one.
All right. Ambassador Lolo, talk ended, agreements signed. Right. Should we have any fears about smooth implementation, considering all the things we have talked about, including the existing relations between these two countries?
Well, I think Prof was very right when he talked of our attitude, that if you look at our track record, you will easily put the blame on our attitude to many things. If you change the mindset of the average Nigerian, and much more so of the people in government, and here I'm not making any distinction when I say people in government.
They are Nigerians.
They're all Nigerians primarily, whether you are in the executive, legislative, or the judicial arm of the tripod. You are primarily in government. If we have a change in attitude and put vision as one thing, commitment, discipline, and drive in what we do, consistency, the result today will be different.
All right. You can see me indicating that I am getting signals that time has closed in. Yes. When I say often,
Welcome.
time flies when you're having a good conversation.
Thank you so much.
So we have come to the end of it, and we'll have to sign off here and now. On behalf of the Nigeria Today crew, I'd like to appreciate you, our guests, Ambassador Bulus Lolo.
Thank you.
Former Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Thank you so much for your precious time. And Professor Judy Wazirike, author and public affairs commentator. Within those few moments, you gave us a lot of insights. We appreciate. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you for watching. And remember, Nigeria Today is on weekdays, same time. You can also watch any edition online at www.youtube.com NTA News 24 Hub. My name is Kande Daniel. Enjoy the rest of your evening.